you've kind of been aware of this thing that's wrong with you. You've been aware of it your whole life. That is what shame is that thinking that something inherently in you is bad. We'll take all the oppression that's coming from outside and turn it on each other. You can't connect to other people until you fully learn to connect to yourself. Not everybody knows that happiness is very hard work.
Welcome to Thought Report. Today I want to talk about gay men and why so many of us experience mental health problems. Now, the statistics are clear, though the numbers do vary, but the rate of depression and anxiety, for example, is at least double in the LGBTQ plus population than for the rest of our society. On this episode, I want to focus on gay men, but many of these topics affect other queer people just as much, if not more. So I want to explore why we are so prone to mental health problems, what causes it, and how we deal with it. And with that, I'd like to introduce my guest. Brian Spitulnik is a psychotherapist based in New York, where he specializes in gay men's mental health. You might also know him from Instagram and TikTok, where he shares valuable mental health information. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, in your social media content, you introduced yourself as a gay therapist working with gay men. Can you share maybe a little bit what drew you to work specifically with gay men as a therapist?
Yeah. I mean, the reason I used to be a dancer. I danced on Broadway for 15 years. And so my entire community was gay. Of course there were not gay people there, but for the most part, it was all gay men. And, I feel like I really grew up, surrounded by these men, a lot of whom were older than me, and by several decades. And what I saw happening, is the thing that happens, to our community, which is that you get to, these men, I saw them getting to 40 and above, and their lives kind of fell off. And really, it was the death of 3 different people that I knew, from suicide or overdose, that I thought, first of all, I thought, can I swear on here? Is it that kind of podcast?
You can swear.
Okay. Well, I thought, fuck, what is going to happen to me when I turn 40? Like, what is this invisible cliff that we fall off of? And 2, I wonder if I can help. It really was like that. And because I knew that dancing has a limited shelf life, I thought, okay, well, this is something I can do next. So I wanted to work with my community. And I always thought of it as, the boys that I shared, they were grown men, but the men that I shared my dressing room with, if I could get them into therapy and get them help before they fell off whatever that cliff is, then I will have fulfilled my own personal mission. So that's why.
What do you say there about turning 40 and aging? We'll talk about that in a minute. But why do you think so many gay men experience, higher rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental illness conditions compared to the general population?
Luckily there's a lot of research on this, and the answer is minority stress.
What does that mean? What does that expression
mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means that we as gay people, and like all marginalized people, experiences stressors and traumas that are unique to us. So I'll just talk about gay men. I won't kind of, extrapolate to all marginalized people. But we go through a period of our lives where we are not ourselves, and it's different now, like I do know kids who just never had to come out, they were just always out. But for the majority of us who are not, who are anywhere above the age of 20 or 25, there was a period of time where we had to hide who we were. And depending on how severe the consequences were of us being seen fully as ourselves, we really had to hide. And just that alone would be enough to cause major, you have identity dysphoria. You don't know who you are. You don't know how to interact in the world. And so that is major, that there's going to be major depression there, major anxiety. So if it was only that we would have trouble. But then there's so much more. If you in any way faced bullying in school, if you in any way had to, if you in any way faced violence, or even just not being accepted by your community, even if your family accepts you, you still are growing up in this larger context. You still exist in a homophobic and heterosexist world. So all of that, just knowing that you're different, knowing that you are not fully accepted as you are, and knowing that there's a part of you that is just inherent and that cannot be changed. There's that deep shame that goes along with feeling that something is bad within you. And that is going to, of course, translate to anxiety, depression, and ways to numb that anxiety and depression with substance use and porn, and there's a million ways to numb and distract. And then, eventually, sometimes suicide.
I want to talk a little bit more about these coping mechanisms that we use in a bit, but I want to pick up on what you said about shame. We grew up in a world that, in a way, isn't for us, and we are told that what we are is wrong. How does that shame affect us?
When you're told that a part of you is wrong, even if the message is not, even if it's a subliminal message, even if nobody ever said that to you directly, that is what shame is that thinking that something inherently in you is bad. It's different from guilt. Guilt is, oh, I did something bad. Guilt is, I broke my mother's vase, and and I'm going to pretend that I didn't do it, and then I feel guilty about that. So when you're a kid, it's very different to feel like there's something about me that is wrong, and there's nothing I can do to fix that. There's nothing I can do to change that. So, wait, what was the question?
How shame affects us? I don't
know how shame affects us. Yeah,
I mean, because for me anyway, growing up in the 80s and 90s, you were constantly told that this kind of the secret that you're hiding is shameful. I don't know. Do you think you said before that there are now a generation who don't have to come out, but there is still shame, right? I mean, we haven't evolved really.
No, that's right. Because the small version of not having to come out exists. If you live in if your family is just kind of completely accepting, or if you live in a community that is just so common to be anything other than heterosexual that it's just not a conversation. But no, for the most part, there's still shame because the world is still telling us other things. When politicians are still making such a big fucking deal about trans issues, there's no way any other LGBTQ person is not going to take that personally, because it is about us. It's just, if the conversation is out there, it affects us. So, how it affects us in our larger life. So if you're thinking of, you've kind of been aware of this thing that's wrong with you, this thing that's bad with you, you've been aware of it your whole life. You carry it into your adult life, and it can come up really in every aspect of your life. So if you look at it in terms of relationships, you learn to do a million different things to keep people away, or to latch onto people to kind of fill whatever that the hole of shame is. There's that. If it's in terms of your community, well, of course, there's all these coping mechanisms of partying and sex, but also just you can think of isolation as, if you're socially isolated, that is something that arises out of shame. Not letting anybody get close to you. The list here really goes on and on. You can think of it in work. Work can, for a lot of people, for a lot of gay men, be the thing that really nicely covers over that shame, because It's something that societally everyone agrees is a really important thing. You know, money, career, stability, everybody agrees that that is, you know, what our country is all about. So if you're able to secure that, then like the shame can kind of be really nicely smoothed over.
Yeah, let's talk a bit more about these, coping mechanisms. You mentioned a few of them there. Perfectionism, overachievement. That's really part of that. Being good at work group. We have body image fixation, substance abuse. What is it about? Do you think? Is it about survival? Is it about control? Why do we need to be perfect?
This depends on the person. It really does. A lot of times I do talk about gay men generally, but it really is specific to who you are and what you've experienced in your life. So I'll say a few things. One, it's very often about shame. You can really boil things down to shame. And shame, another way of looking at that, is a lack of compassion for yourself. It's a lack of love for yourself. So if you have to have a perfect body in order to feel lovable from the outside, it also might indicate that you think that you are not able to love yourself without a lot of caveats. And the same thing with substances. If you are needing to escape your reality because in your reality you're not loved or lovable, then of course you're going to reach for meth every time you want to have sex because it's so completely outside of reality. And then this is something I was talking about this week where this is not true for all gay men. Not all gay men have perfect bodies, not all, or even strive for it. Not all gay men have perfect apartments. Not all gay men have, are highly successful in their careers. There's just as many of us who struggle to take a shower every day, who struggle to, make our beds ever, to drink a glass of water. And this is kind of the other side of shame, where shame tells you, I'm not worthy of care. I'm not worthy of love. I am fundamentally bad. So why should I take care of myself? And that narrative is enough to keep you from loving yourself, but just on the surface, keeps you neglecting your very basic needs: food, hygiene, connection.
Just picking up on body image, and you mentioned aging before. Why is it so hard, do you think, for gay men to age? I mean, the joke is that many gay men age better than anyone else, but why is it such a big topic?
We live in a youth obsessed culture, of course, so that's broadly true. Women have it just as bad but different,
Yeah.
Straight men somehow get a pass, lucky guys. But essentially we can look at the culture and say this is a culture that's obsessed with youth. Every marketing campaign, these kids are 17 years old that we see on billboards, and that's what we think of as the ideal of beauty. So there's that. But then there's also the way we perpetuate it within our community. There's a thing called horizontal oppression, where a minority group will kind of feed on itself. We'll take all the oppression that's coming from outside and turn it on each other because, well, it's just what happens. But it makes us feel like we're in control. So it makes us feel more powerful. And so you see it all the time. People will say like, no, I won't sleep with a guy without a six pack. And it's like, what? Or like, oh, or whatever it is they're saying about someone else. It's of course a reflection of how they feel about themselves, or their fears for themselves. And so when it comes to youth, it was exacerbated by the AIDS epidemic because, first of all, nobody got to get old. but also people started to look old before their time and they were sick. And this also dovetails with the body obsession, getting the whole like gorgeous body, steroids and testosterone and all that really started in response to AIDS, to AIDS wasting people's bodies away. So that is a huge component of it. But more than anything, it's just about perfectionism. More than anything, it's just about saying, as you get old, we fall apart. Our body, we lose bone mass, we lose collagen. Like we start to deteriorate. That is something that is just part of the circle of life. It happens. And so part of the perfectionism that is fueled by shame tells us that that's not acceptable.
I want to talk a little bit more about drugs and alcohol. Substance use, substance abuse, it is really a big topic in our community. For many, it starts out, it's a social lubricant, it's part of, the club, it's part of the community, but then often it can become an emotional anesthetic. You mentioned it before, chemsex and people who can't have sex without drugs. How do you see this? Is there a healthy way to use drugs and alcohol in our community?
Yeah, in fact, there is. And I've had a lot of people ask me recently, a lot of my clients and friends, ask me if I'm anti-drugs. And the answer is no. I'm actually for drugs. And the answer is it's not even in moderation, because what on earth does that mean? You can't tell an addict to use drugs in moderation. It's meaningless. It means nothing. But I am a fan of exploring and seeing what works for you and seeing what's fun and seeing what experiences feel good and what experiences don't. But more than anything, I'm a proponent of being informed. Don't just take whatever your friend is giving you. Like, really know what you're taking, what the dosage. Now there's no excuse to not know. Like, ask ChatGPT, ask Google. These resources will tell you how much you should take, how often, what you can expect if you mix substances. So all of that is great. And then what I am very much against is doing drugs every week or multiple times a week, or even for some people every month. And it happens so easily. It happens so effortlessly that you fall into, here's my friend group. My friend group is going out every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's not just alcohol. Actually, alcohol is starting to get in the way of drugs. It's a cocktail of drugs 3 days a week. And then you're wondering why you are fractured and why you have no contact with yourself, why you have no ability to connect with others.
But for many people, that is their outlet, that is their coping mechanism. What are the alternatives if you don't have another community, another place?
Yeah, well, it's such a good question. And this is something I don't fully have an answer to, because of course there is a sober gay community. And truly, I don't actually know what that looks like, because I haven't explored too much. But what I'm seeing instead is people who are able to show up with their friends, and if they're not doing drugs, they're able to go have fun. They can still go to the party or the club or whatever it is they're going to, and they can still have fun. And then they take themselves home when they're tired. That is a very adult thing to do. Go to a party and go home when you're tired. And the fact is, it starts to become really not fun to be around fucked up people as they're getting fucked up. Like there's that point where everybody's starting to get loose, and then that's fun. And then everybody kind of goes to a very different level, and it's no longer fun. So in some ways you can still be around it, and just make different decisions. However, if you're an addict, that is a different thing. Very often you can't be around it. which is why then a sober community comes into play. And I say I haven't explored that because I think there are very specific sober communities where a lot of their cohesion is formed around sobriety. So I wouldn't be the one to speak on that. But what are the alternatives? The other alternative is also in your non-party time, doing the very difficult and ongoing work of getting to know yourself. I actually have noticed this, that not everybody knows that happiness is very hard work. It's kind of like the dirty secret of contentment, is that it is very hard work to stay happy and to be happy. The world is not designed for us to be happy. Our brains biologically are not wired to be happy. We're not wired to be content. So you have to start asking yourself, what if I just didn't dislike myself? What if I just didn't go out? What if I just didn't follow this impulse? What happens if you just don't do all those habitual things and you come back to yourself and you get to know yourself? Maybe you will want to do different things.
You mentioned, the adult thing to do is to go home. I've seen in your content recently, you talked about immaturity, emotional immaturity. I feel many gay men, we relive our adolescence in our 20s and 30s, maybe because we didn't have a chance to be, young when we were, or teenagers when we were. Why is there this immaturity, do you think?
Well, it's exactly what you say. It's that a lot of us were not allowed to be young when we were young. So I'll speak for myself. I was very lucky. I had a girlfriend that I loved in high school, and we were together for 3 years. It was wonderful. And then I kind of started realizing, wait, something's not right here. And then we broke up, and then I came out, and I was like, oh. So then I had to experience all over again what a first love felt like, and what discovering sex felt like, and discovering what my identity felt like. All of that is, developmentally supposed to happen in your teen years. That is when you're supposed to be exploring and rebelling and doing all these things. A lot of gay men didn't rebel. Not all of them. Of course, the ones who did rebel, maybe were not rebelling in a way, maybe rebelling in a way that was covering over their sexuality rather than allowing them to explore it. And so the answer is very simple. Yes, we did not get to do the things that the other kids were doing when they were doing them. So we bring that into our adulthood. And that is appropriate. I mean, it's good for us to be able to explore. I mean, I work with some men who came out at 50 or at 60, and actually do tell them, like, you should really be having your gay adolescence now. You should really be fucking around. You should really be just be the slut that you didn't get to be, because it's important to know what that is and to get to explore it. And it's similar to what I say about drugs. Like, find out what you like, find out what experiences are good, find out what experiences are bad, and be careful and be informed and all that. And then it's time to put that away. It's time to develop, eventually it's always time to evolve. So when gay men get stuck at that age, at that developmental stage, and never get to go to the next stage, which is connecting, and which is forming authentic community, and then after that is it's time to think about your legacy and what you're leaving behind on this earth and what work is important to you. So if you don't get to those stages fully and you're stuck in the developmental stage of just fucking around, you're stunted. You're developmentally arrested.
It's interesting what you say about, this is part of hookup culture, isn't it? We talked earlier about my generation, presumably your generation as well, older millennials, younger Gen Xers who, we grew up in the shadow of the AIDS epidemic. But by the time many of us were adults, HIV was no longer a death sentence. And, for me, it's shaped so much of my sexuality. And now with PrEP, for example, it's like, a second gay liberation. Maybe we can just pick up on the hookup culture, a hypersexuality, if you go on Grindr, I'm sure it's like that in New York, here in Berlin at least, if you don't have extreme fetishes or, kinks, you're the odd one out. But that doesn't seem to be, the reality. So there is so much pressure. How does that affect us, do you think?
Oh man. It's interesting. The men that I work with are, of course, self-selecting. They're coming to me for help. So when it comes to hookup culture, I really only have the view of the population coming to me, and what I see mostly is that people are using Grindr for in New York anyway. Well, in the U.S. I could say, because I work with people all over the country. They're really using Grindr as a dating app just as much as an immediate hookup app. People are using sniffies more for immediate hookups and for fetishes. But so what I'm hearing is less about the pressure to. That's really interesting. That sounds very Berlin to me, that there would be extreme fetishes and extreme desires, essentially kinks. Do you want to say more about that?
No, I was maybe, yeah, it might just be a Berlin thing.
It might be very specific to Berlin, but it also might be that the men that I see for therapy are not in that subculture. So it might just be them, so it's like there are these little pockets within our community, of course. But what people do say is that there is a sense that everyone is disposable on the apps because, well, first of all, there's so many gay men in New York, but the endless scroll of everything, the endless scroll of Instagram, the endless scroll of TikTok, the endless scroll of Grindr and stuff, it lends itself to the belief that we are all disposable. There is always something better, because there is always something better, better being defined by whatever it is that you want in that moment. So that has completely broken down any idea of authentic connection that you could form in real life. And it's also broken down people's ability to know what it is they connect to. Because, if you and I met in a bar, we would know if there was something there. We would know if there was chemistry, or there would know if there was an attraction. Over a screen, I mean, this is different. We're having a conversation, but over a little thumbnail is like, what are you deciding? How are you deciding who is okay for you and who is not? It has very little to do with who that person is, obviously, and what you would find actually attractive in real life.
I mean, this has a lot to do with loneliness in the end, doesn't it? I mean, there was a recent post where you talked about what you call the nothing matters syndrome. When hope, I wrote it down here, when hope has been crushed enough times, attachment feels safer than desire. I mean, I'm pretty sure there is a loneliness epidemic in society, but it's worse in the gay community, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And that has to do, unfortunately, that also has to do with shame. We can really trace it all back to shame. It's not that, so if you got yourself to the ultimate state of being without shame and you fully love yourself, completely, totally, in every way, in every second of the day, I think you might still feel loneliness. I think you would still have the very human experience of we're born alone and we die alone. I think. But for gay men, we have built so many barriers between ourselves and the world that, of course, there are barriers between ourselves and the people who are closest to us. So it's just another long way of saying that, like, deep shame builds big walls, and they're going to keep us isolated. And so reaching out, trying to connect when you don't really know how to connect to yourself is impossible. So for me, that's what it comes back to. You can't connect to other people until you fully learn to connect to yourself.
For those who know you from social media, you have a line that you say towards the end of your clips. What's the next right action for you? What do you think healing looks like for a gay man who, has carried a lifetime of shame?
I truly think, and I'm teaching a course right now. I'm really excited about it because I'm taking about 20 men, and they're going to give me feedback. Like, part of the course is they're going to give me feedback about what's working, what's not. So I'm just in the beginning stages of that, but it's, of course, the question. And the real answer for me is going inward first. You have to go inward. And that can mean a million different things in a million different ways. What that means for me, and the thing that I'm going to be teaching, is you start with mindfulness. And mindfulness just means you notice things. You notice your thoughts. You notice your breathing. You notice how you're interacting with people. You notice what roles you're taking on. So you're just noticing. That's where it begins. You notice who you are, how you show up, and what happens in your body and mind. And then once you've started to notice, you can start to talk to yourself, essentially. You can start to connect to yourself by saying, okay, I see this thought coming up. I have compassion towards that thought, and I'm not going to believe everything this thought is saying. It's just a thought. Or I have this part coming forward and telling me that if I don't work harder, I'm going to be alone forever. I can have compassion towards that part. I can understand why that part is there, what it's doing for me, and I can just let it know it's okay, and I'm going to still do what I'm going to do. I don't have to kill myself working. So it's about self-compassion.
Brian Spitulnik, I want to thank you for your time, for your insight. This has been such a great chat. And I think the work that you're doing both online and offline is really important for so many people. Thanks again for coming on and talking to me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely.
And I think if people want to find you on social media, you're at Spitulnik on all the socials.
Correct. That's right.
Thanks again, Brian. That's it for the show. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And please leave a comment about anything we've talked about. I'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out on TikTok and Instagram. You'll find the show with the handle @ThoughtReport. Thanks for your company. See you next time.